It is human nature to behave differently when alone. There are things that you prefer to do alone when no one is watching you. Whether it's an embarrassing habit, a secret, or a fart, there are times when you don't want anyone watching. This police officer thought he was all alone in the elevator, but he hadn't considered the hidden camera. This camera captured everything that happened, so now we know a big secret of his. The police officer in question, Deputy Tony Sherb, had been working at the El Paso County Sheriff's Office in the United States for 29 years when the camera exposed his secret. According to his colleagues, Tony was very surly and strict, but he was also known for his professionalism. No one had ever seen this side of Tony. In the decades he worked at the sheriff's office, he'd been good at hiding this side of himself. But everything changed on that particular day. He wasn't aware there was a hidden camera in the elevator. It was Tony's last day of work after nearly 3 decades of service to the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. It was time to retire. Tony had already said goodbye to his colleagues and was about to go home. All that stood between him and his pension were a couple of floors. Tony got into the elevator to go down. He was very much looking forward to the freedom that comes with a well-deserved retirement. Little did he know that the hidden camera was watching him closely. It wouldn't be long before the entire sheriff's office would find out about his secret. Tony was very close to retirement after 3 decades of service. The veteran was one of El Paso's longest-serving officers. In all those years, he had made quite a name for himself. He was known as one of the best. Throughout his career, Tony had primarily worked as a traffic police officer. During his shifts, Tony often sat in the car with a partner, which forced him to suppress the secret side of him. He had hidden it so well that his colleagues couldn't believe their eyes once they saw the images from the hidden camera in the elevator. They were shocked. All those years Tony had held back. There was a certain side to him that he had never shown to anyone. Because Tony valued professionalism so highly, he thought it was important to suppress these kinds of traits. He stood for something. This wasn't part of that. But now that he was retiring, he had nothing to lose. The day had come when Deputy Tony Sherb would no longer hold back. It had been bubbling inside of him for 3 decades. Every time he had to act professional and cop-like again. No, today all bets were off. He just didn't know that this would be recorded by the hidden camera. When Tony got into the elevator after his very last day, he did so with mixed feelings. On the one hand, of course, he really liked having time to spare for his hobbies and to have more freedom. But on the other hand, he considered work to be one of his hobbies. He was going to miss it, especially his colleagues. Although Tony was often surly and cold, his colleagues were very important to him. He regretted that he would be seeing them a lot less now, or maybe not at all. Before long, he would be officially retired. This was a very strange moment for Tony, but somehow it also felt liberating. He no longer had to hold back. What Tony didn't know was that a camera had recently been installed in the elevator. The elevator had regularly been out of order, which caused a lot of frustration among the police officers. The police department's technical service had done their best to determine the cause, but the mystery had not yet been solved. So the technical service had decided to install a camera in the elevator. For all they knew, something happened inside of the elevator that caused it to go out of order. Only a few police officers were aware of the camera. Tony had missed this memo, so his behavior would be on display for all to see. His colleagues had not expected this. The technical service had not taken into account that people do crazy things behind closed doors. From nose-picking to full-blown affairs, the internet is full of images of people misbehaving behind closed elevator doors, so they could have expected that crazy things would also be exposed by their camera. As we said before, you behave differently when you think no one is watching. So to this almost pensioner, Deputy Tony Sherb, Tony stood in the elevator full of conflicting emotions. Before long, he would be officially retired. After holding back all these years, it was time to let it all go. The elevator doors closed and Tony, under the watchful eye of the camera, showed us who he really was. What he did is something you wouldn't expect from a gruff, professional cop like Tony. You will be as surprised as Tony's colleagues were because they too had never looked for this behind the old-timer. Curious about what he did. The elevator doors had barely closed when Tony sprang into action. A hip-hop song sounded through the speakers. Tony, the gruff, professional officer, shook his hips. As if he had been practicing for years, Tony conjured up all the steps that went with this song. Now watch me whip, now watch me na-na. And whip and na-na-na he did. No one ever expected that Deputy Tony Scherb would turn out to be such an avid dancer. Tony put on a real show behind closed doors. Little did he know that he was being watched by a hidden camera. Tony also didn't know then that he would be caught by his boss. Watch Me, Whip Na Na, a world-famous song by the American artist Silento, was playing in the elevator. The song hit the charts in 2015 when it reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in America. Tony apparently knew the song all too well, because it didn't take long before he was completely going with the flow. As Tony was whipping and na-naing, as the dance moves that go with this song are called, he didn't realize that the hidden camera was recording him. In fact, Tony was so focused on his dancing that he didn't hear the ding when the elevator reached another floor. The elevator doors slid open, and it became apparent that he could no longer keep his secret. Officer Reed, a colleague of Tony's, had no idea what hit her as she entered the elevator. Tony was now so caught up that he couldn't stop. How would Officer Reed react, having caught her colleague Tony doing a one-man show? Reed had been a colleague of Tony's for years, but she had never expected this from him. This old, gruff, professional police officer apparently had an unexpected hobby. Tony was now so caught up in his performance that he also started singing along. How would Officer Reed react? Officer Reed was momentarily taken aback, but apparently the combination of the music and Tony's incredible enthusiasm was very contagious. So it didn't take long before Officer Reed was dancing along to Silento's song. This started to look more and more like a nightclub rather than an elevator in a police station. Both agents showed each other their best dance moves. They pulled out all the stops to impress each other. It didn't take long before the two got onto the same vibe and did the so-called stanky leg dance step together. And meanwhile, the security camera was keeping an eye on things. While the two were having a great time, the elevator stopped on the floor of their manager, the chief deputy officer. The elevator doors slide open and both Tony and Officer Reed froze to the spot. Their supervisor, the chief deputy officer, stepped into the elevator. Because the two didn't want to look unprofessional, they decided to stop dancing. So different from the party the two just had. The chief deputy officer also seems to like the music. He nods his head along with the beat, as if he is holding back as well. Wouldn't you rather be dancing like Tony and Officer Reed were before he stepped in? Unfortunately, we will never know the answer to that question, because he got off the elevator at the next floor. What would Tony and Officer Reed do? The doors had only just closed and Tony and his colleague were already shaking their hips. The song wasn't over yet, so with Silento's music sounding in the background, the two pulled out all the stops. They went all out in the elevator. They celebrated life behind closed doors on the way to Tony's retirement. Still, this wasn't all. They were about to get caught by their boss, who would react very peculiarly to their dancing. But first the elevator made one more stop. The elevator stops, and the doors slide open. Officer Murphy, another colleague of Officer Reed and Tony Scherb, steps in. How would she react? She was on the fence at first, while Tony and Officer Reed continued their dance party. She'd never seen Tony like this before. Then she decided to go with the flow of the music and started shaking her hips. Who had expected this? 3 dancing cops in an elevator. Sounds like the start of a really bad joke, though the 3 are having a great time. They don't know that their party is about to be disrupted. The elevator stops. The dancers know very well which floor they are on now, so they decide to stop. Their boss, Sheriff Bill Elder, steps into the elevator. Could he have seen the CCTV footage? The 3, unaware that their dance party had already been captured by a hidden camera, trying to contain themselves the best they could. Hopefully, their boss doesn't realize they misbehaved in the elevator. The sheriff stands with his back turned to the trio. As can be seen in the hidden camera footage, you can tell that the 3 cops would be happy to continue their dance party, but that will have to wait until the sheriff gets out, unless it turns out that the 3 police officers in the back of the elevator aren't the only ones who think the song is catchy. Sheriff Bill Elder, the dancer's boss, suddenly starts dancing. The officers couldn't believe their eyes, but the floodgates had been opened. They too commenced their inexhaustible repertoire again. Who is the best dancer? The 4 officers look like they're engaged in a full-blown dance battle. What a way to end Deputy Tony Scherb's last day. Who would have ever expected that the gruff, professional cop could dance so well? And how about his colleagues? Officer Reed, Officer Murphy, and Sheriff Bill Elder, they were having a great time. The video, recorded by the hidden camera in the elevator, has been shared on social media by the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. In just a few days, the video had been viewed millions of times. No wonder. You don't often see how police officers in uniform behave behind closed doors. Apparently, they love to dance and have fun just as much as you and me. Deputy Tommy Sherb must have left his former workplace with a big smile. Who knows, maybe we'll see him again on the big stage. Today there is a camera on almost every street corner, so you never know if you're all alone. Keep that in mind the next time you misbehave. Anyone could be watching.